for the introduction. I had no coffee, so you can see that. Hopeless at this time. All right, and I start my timer. So, well, thank you for inviting me to this really interesting talk. Event. I'm again. My name is RAMELLA-ROMAN. I'm from Florida International University. It's a public university of the Florida system, and we're located in Miami. The topic today is imaging of an isotropic tissue, and let me define it for you on the get-go. So as actually the previous speaker really beautifully illustrated, we can mimic tissue and its ultrastructure with a number of small particles that we don't consider isotropically oriented within the tissue itself, pretty much like this one. So they may be of different size. They may also not be circular. They may be oblong of some sort. But they represent pretty well what is the ultrastructure of the tissue, which is made of mitochondria, lysosomes, collagen, membranes, and etc. And we can model this, in a number of ways, and now more sophisticated ways are emerging, as Colin has illustrated. But the tissue I'm interested in is actually the one that exhibits a structural anisotropy. So where is this ultrastructure itself has a very specific order, and there are many examples in our body of such type of tissue. For example, the cornea, the sclera in the eye, the optic nerve head, and bone, cartilage, tendon, of course, highly structurally aligned. And but even bulk tissues such as skin and cervix can exhibit this type of anisotropic orientation. So, and one thing I will focus on is particularly collagen, which is the dominant component of the extracellular matrix, and as we know, is made of a hierarchical fibrillous structure that ultimately forms bundles, like in this case knee connective tissue, or here in the ruptured tendon you can see the bundle arrangement. And of course exhibit birefringence, exhibit linear birefringence at the molecular level, intrinsic linear birefringence at the molecular level, but also birefringence of form. So by packing all this fibrillar structure, we are creating a birefringent sample. So, one typical way to illustrate this is a number of cylinders, and with they packed together with the extraordinary and ordinary index refraction. So, even normal skin, to some extent, has this type of local anisotropy. So it's at the short range, skin has spatially ordered fibrillar system. And again, I wanted to point you a paper that recently came out by Ribeiro that showed with birefringent microscopy this structure, this ultrastructure of skin. And this is actually skin that is being pulled in this direction and in this direction. And skin ultimately really behaves like a mesh, so that you can see these patterns, the anisotropy of collagen changing just by stress. So, but even with super simple model early in the day, this is Steve Jacks' example of cone-cross polarimetry and obtaining, a simple co-cross polarization image. You can see that you could already see this collagen orientation within the skin, and even better, shown by others, actually, if you use very short wavelengths and a small area, you can start, this is about 2 millimeter, you can start showing this collagen arrangement within the ultrastructure of the skin. Then again, if you have devastating effect as a burn injury, the anisotropy of collagen will show up in grand ways. So these are examples of hypertrophic scars where, again, caused by burn injury, where up to 67% of individuals with this severe burn injury will develop hypertrophic scar. And you can see how the ultrastructure of the skin, from being a nice ordered mesh with great elasticity, has now become much more rigid and shows this particular orientation. For example, here, this is a big bundle that limits the function of this individual to move his neck. So in terms of hypertrophic scars, they are very firm because of the changes in the extracellular metric. And they generally exhibit this abnormal skin collagen organization, which we call anisotropic. They're raised because there is increased cellularity within the scar, and the packing of the collagen itself is not only more directional, but it's also thicker, right? So you can develop very large and very raised hypertrophic scar. So we got interested in this project. We had a burn center near my previous university in Washington, D.C., and they called us up to find a better way to quantify the evolution of a scar, given that present tools are just based on doctor observation, and particularly on a 1 to 5 scale called the Vancouver scar scale. So where things like, again, the firmness, the height, the color of the scar is evaluated by a physician. So it's a very subjective type of scale. So we built a system to try and quantify this Vancouver scar scale to provide quantitative metrics. And the system was really focused on certain parameters. One was collagen alignment, if we could determine this anisotropic of the tissue. We were very, very interested in roughness back in the day because texture is one of the parameters of the Vancouver scar scale. And we thought that we could do that with polarization, and so we focused on polarization, autoplane polarization for that. And then we looked also at molecular component. I won't go into the depth of the study, but I'll just give you an overview of what we did. So we looked at absorption and scarring coefficient with the SFDI, spatial frequency domain imaging. And also we looked at perfusion using laser Doppler images. So the thought was, can we quantify the effect of pressure on scar formation? So pressure is a typical way, is the general way that physicians use these days to limit the growth of the hypertrophic scars. So in terms of the polarization, we use this strategy of autoplane polarimetry, where we have a Stokes vector imager in the middle, and then we have a series of azimutally arranged light sources, which are also polarized. They're linearly polarized. And what this provides, first of all, again, I have not put it here, but this is the best way to get roughness. So it's the autoplane approach, the BRDF approach has been used over the years to establish roughness metrics. But in terms of collagen arrangement, we realized that if you focus on parameters, for example, like the degree of circular polarization, you can find some very typical lobing, which then point to the dominant orientation of the anisotropic tissue. So ultimately, by doing this approach on an image, you can go pixel by pixel and reconstruct the dominant arrangement, these are angles, of that particular structure. And from there, you can calculate things like the degree of orientation or the preferential axis orientation. So we built again, we were establishing if pressure can limit the growth of a scar or can allow the skin to reform in a more normal way. So we built these little devices that we mounted on our animal model, and these are active pressure delivery systems. So they sense the force that the scar imposes on them, and they push back. So if the animal moves or the scar grows, we constantly impose some pressure onto the scar, which is, in this case, 30 millimeter of mercury. And these are wireless devices. There is a little wire here, but it goes to basically a battery pack that was mounted on our animal. And we looked at this animal for a fairly long time. We actually had 6 of these very large pig. Pig has the best skin. It's just like ours, a little bit thicker maybe and a lot hairier, but in most cases. So the pig models are standards in scar evaluation. So we looked at 6 of these animals, and we also did a lot of histology of the data. Again, I will not show the data. I'll just focus on the polarization. But these are treated scar with pressure. These are sham scar. So we had 2 scars, one where we imposed pressure and one where we didn't. And ultimately, we looked at molecular components, deoxyhemoglobin, melanin, and water content for the scar themselves, getting maps of these parameters, and ultimately trying to quantify their effect. But the thing that I want to point you to is this orientation index, which is what I described with the autoplane polarimetry. So this is basically a degree of how much the scar is aligned, so how much is aligned versus a predefined angle. And this is over time, so these are days of the study. The red are our assessment of orientation, while the black is a histology results. The black masses really tells us more about collagen packing than anything else, not specifically alignment. But we can see how this methodology actually mimics fairly well. It's fairly close to what we find in the outplane polarimetry and the histology seem to go hand in hand. And ultimately, the green results here instead is the Vancouver scar scale, which told a bit of a different story. So the Vancouver scar scale goes in between. It's a numerical scale between 1 and 5, and here the physician is telling us this skin is soft, this skin is yielding, but ultimately the ultrastructure of the tissue had a more a diverse story. So we thought that was a little telling, because the physician or the physicians, because there's more than one data point, had a different perception than what this tissue ultimately was. Now let me switch here and go to the cervix, another anisotropic arrangement of collagen and tissue. And again, the cervix is predominantly the extracellular matrix in the cellular in the cervix is predominantly collagen, up to 77%. This arrangement has been, the arrangement of collagen is longitudinal at the edge of the cervix. As you get close to the OS, this is the OS canal, it becomes circular, so orients itself as a tube, and then again goes back to longitudinal at the OS. So this was shown earlier on with histology in '88, and we believe that that's our key to establish, to find new way of diagnosing preterm labor. So, in particular, spontaneous preterm labor, which is defined as the delivery of a baby between 20 and 36 weeks of gestation plus 6 weeks to baby. And is the #1 cause of infant death worldwide. And in the developing and developed world, as Miami, preterm labor is a huge problem. Up to 18% of babies are delivered in early. And in the low resource setting or developing country is also fairly large, between 11 and 15%. Now, a baby that is delivered prematurely has all sorts of problems, from brain development to lung development. So survival in the developed world is much lower than in the US. But nevertheless, this individual, especially at the early stages, never recover, and so there is a real interest in trying to bring babies to term. So why women go in preterm labor? There are a number of causes, and scientists and physicians are still trying to pinpoint main causes, but infection, inflammation, poor nutrition, ethnicity seems to play a role, genetic predisposition, stress, of course, causes preterm labor. In terms of prevention, there is not a great deal of things that you can do. There is vaginal progesterone and cerclage, and intramuscular progesterone is given as well to women that have a history of preterm labor. So it's been shown to be preventive. Of course, bed rest can help in preventing preterm labor. So this illustrates a little bit the phases of pregnancies, and particularly going into effacement and delivery. So the collagen goes in, the cervix go into various stages of softening, shortening, effacing, and ultimately dilating to allow the baby to come into the world. But there are abnormal conditions, such as funneling in this case, where this nice progression is altered. And one aim of this study is trying to find quantitative way to predict this alteration. So I'm not sure you can see the image very well, but a lot of work has been done in terms of quantifying this fibrous structure in the cervix, and great work in MRI showing the color is orientation, basically showing how the fibrils are oriented across the cervix in this circular way, and but there are also longitudinal, fibers, and oh shit, I went to the end. Let me see. But if you do a cross-sectional imaging, you can start seeing the orientation of this bundle of fiber across the OS. So this is the vaginal canal and the OS right there. So in the mouse model, furthermore, people have shown how the arrangement of collagen really dissipates during the various days of gestation. And they've shown this with, beautifully with second harmonic generation. And other groups, particularly the groups of Myers and Gunn, have shown that OCT can also be used to look at the cervix and find this dominant orientation of the fibrous structure, which is, again, mostly collagen and muscle. And they've done so in the excised human cervix. So, obviously, in such oriented collagenous arrangement, we realized that mirror matrix polarimetry could be used to find, this fibrous orientation, but also retardation in the sense of quantity of fibers and depolarization to look at collagen and scattering. Right now, I'll focus on orientation. We decided to use OCT as well to compare our results with the Gunn's group. And we started with we had built, we published recently this work on combining polarization sensitive OCT with mirror matrix polarimeters. So this is the typical polarization OCT arrangement where you use a coherent light source, and then you have the interferometer here, and then two polarization sensitive spectrometer to collect the EX, EY, and then the OCT obviously has to scan, so it has a Galvo mirror that goes to a mirror and goes to the sample. And we coupled here the mirror matrix system, which is based on a pair of liquid crystal retarders and a polarizer. And so these are some mirror matrix. This, you can see how the mirror matrix and the PSOCT are co-registered. And we get some images. We can also, this system is actually free space, so has all the inconvenience of free space system, but it can also be switched into unpolarized OCT fiber coupled, so we just need to, couple our, again, the splitter and the fiber bundle to the same optical path and the PSOCT, and we can get unpolarized OCT coupled to co-register to mirror matrix polarimetry. So the specs of the system is a 840 nanometer system with an axial resolution of 5 microns and longitudinal about 6.2 microns. The mirror matrix system is based on a LED light source. It's fairly broadband actually. It's about 20 nanometer full width at max. At center 540 nanometer, and again it's two liquid crystal retarders with a polarized arrangement, and the field of view for both is about a centimeter. So we are looking at the cervix, and to look at the cervix with OCT, we have to create MFAS images. So you take a series of B-scan, you create a volume, and then you look at from top down the MFAS imagery. And in order to create this arrangement, you have to average the stats, the MFAS imaging. In our case, we averaged 5 MFAS images. Then you eliminate the speckle with a medium filter, and then you enhance the edge of this fibrilla structure with Sobel filtering. And we did not came up with this process. The Gunn group showed it in many different tissues, including the cervix. What is our what is different from their application is that we use the radon transform to pinpoint the principal, the dominant angle in the fibrilla structure, while they just stay with the Sobel approach. So in terms of radon, with again, the radon gives you the projection angle results, which we then compute in terms of standard deviation of the radon versus normalized by the standard deviation of the image itself. And what this gives us is images like this that show this very clear peak, which is the dominant angle of this tissue. So let me just show you some example. Well, first let me go into the Wiener-matrix polarimetry. We use the Luft-Shipment decomposition to extrapolate the various components of the Wiener-matrix, and ultimately we calculate alpha, the slow axis orientation, and we finally use circular statistic to obtain the dominant angle. This is a alpha image of a silicon phantoms that we built in my lab. Again, I'm not sure you can see the color, but the line should guide you onto which is the dominant orientation in this tissue, which you can orient in any direction, right? So if we compare this with the OCT imagery, this is the normal and fast image, this is the OCT image with the averaging, you can see that you can definitely see this striation, and the radon is, on something like this, it's very efficient, it will pick it right up. Again, we go on sub areas, so we really calculate this angle in tiny spaced voxel. So this is tendon. Again, we can orient tendon. In this case, it's somewhat normal. So this is the again, contrast is not great here, but this is the PS OCT imagery. You can see the face wrapping of typical tendon, and then again the orientation. And this is the mirror matrix alpha image. So again, we capture fairly well the dominant orientation of this tissue. Now let's go to cervix. Show that. Here again, we can see this is the OS. So this is cervix in paraffin, and we can see the orientation in OCT is pretty circular around the OS. And these are the mirror matrix images that we obtained. And again, I added these black lines to show you to help your eye in following the orientation, which is circular around the OS, somewhat, mostly circular around the OS. And but if you go through the colors, you can see that we are going from yellow to blue, right? Yellow to blue to purple to red, and then back to yellow, right? So we span all the angles around this OS. And this doesn't look great here. I can show it in my computer later on if you're interested. So alpha, but we can also measure retardation, and we can measure depolarization, and these are numerically, reasonable values similar to what has been shown by Tatiana's and the Martino's group in previous publications. Now, what is the goal of this? Of course, we like that we can measure, we can show that this circular arrangement just optically, but the ultimate goal is really to quantify collagen, right, or the dispersion of collagen during pregnancy. So this is again work done by Dan, showing this OCT of a pregnant individual, excised cervix again, and this is a non-pregnant individual. You can see that the arrangement is somewhat more dispersed here than here, but if you go here in one region of this cervix, you can then quantify the dispersion of collagen, right? Where non-pregnant is much more aligned, right? So close to one specific angle, while pregnant is much more dispersed. And they show that this can be mimicked by typical distribution of angle, which is the von Mises distribution, which is based on a vessel function. So again, we can do the same. Now here my students decide to get really large areas, but even with these larger areas, we can see this distribution, this normal porcine cervix. So these are pretty oriented areas, and we can quantify with kurtosis or with the parameter based on the von Mises distribution. We can also, of course, model this. So we developed Monte Carlo models that take into account collagen orientation, modifying some of our earlier code. And basically at each scattering event, we find the orientation of the collagen, and we create retardation based on the indices of refraction. We tested it. It actually is quite accurate. Let me finish by saying that what we wanted to show with our model is that the mirror matrix technique could be useful in separating these, non-pregnant versus pregnant results. So we modeled the distribution of angle shown by Gunn in pregnant and non-pregnant women with something a little simpler than the von Mises, because for Monte Carlo purposes, the von Mises was very hard to represent. So we used instead the box mirror distribution, and this is how they show up. But ultimately, the Monte Carlo results clearly, can separate this pregnant versus non-pregnant data in the cervix, and we can even start quantifying it. And using those von Mises parameters, so that we're close. We're not exactly there because this was pretty different, but we are in the right ballpark. So we are doing now this in vivo. We built a colposcope-based mirror matrix polarimeter, and again, we are in the cervix, and here is our circular image of the collagen around the cervix. It takes us about a second to take the 16 images, so we do the analysis in post-processing, obviously. But we are now entering a clinical trial phase to demonstrate this hypothesis of, can we use this fiber distribution arrangement to predict preterm labor, and again, we're in clinical trial to prove the hypothesis. So maybe I will report back to you in a few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. This paper is open for questions. You go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. But I'm just confused a bit. When you apply the pressure, that makes additional stress for the collagen fibers.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding that if you do that, so the birefringence properties of collagen fibers are changed as well. And thus, when you apply this Lütman-Chapman algorithm, if the properties are changed layer by layer with no a priori knowledge of how they changed, how it's effective to be used in general for quantitative assessment of changes within the tissue.
Right. Yeah, so two things. The pressure that we impose is 30 millimeter of mercury, so if you gently touch yourself with your finger, that's 30 millimeter of mercury. So it's not, you're not yanking on the animal. It's a very low pressure, and that pressure is actually used to limit the blood. It's used to create a hypoxic condition. So you're basically squishing the capillary network. You're not really imposing a great deal of pressure on the collagen. And so that's why pressure is imposed. That's been shown to be beneficial to create a hypoxic environment because collagen doesn't grow, so the lysing of collagen is different in a hypoxic scenario than in an oxygenated scenario. So you're trying to rebalance the creation of collagen versus the lysing of collagen. So that's why pressure is imposed. And the second is, so I don't think it has a great deal of effect on collagen itself, but that said, I just wanted to correct you on the fact that we didn't use mirror matrix in that case. We were using a very simple, linear approach, out-of-plane polarimetry approach. But I really don't think it has any effect on collagen itself. I haven't looked at it, but.
I had a question. More on that point, did you see any sort of correlations between the collagen structure and the blood parameters? You said there was hypoxia. Was total blood content different or water content?
Yeah. So those are really the parameters that worked the best, I have to say.
Okay.
They were more clear because scar itself has a very dynamic life course, and so it goes into state of inflammation, and when you have inflammation you can see more blood, so you can quantify blood content, blood volume basically. There is also more water, so that was quantified and showed pretty well. And then as the scar evolved, they basically normalized themselves in the treated scar, while in the untreated scar, things went a little bit awry. They did not come back to a normal. So the work is published. I can point you to it. But yeah, the molecular stuff actually worked quite well. But we were interested in polarization.
So in another, I was curious about the cervix project. Do you think that the sort of pressure that the fetus is putting on the cervix is affecting those parameters as well as the polarimetry? Like, is there a difference with the week of the pregnancy and what you're seeing?
Well, I haven't done pregnant women yet, but
Okay.
People have done. So the group by Gunn has shown has focused on this on not so much how the fetus imposes pressure, but on the load-bearing property of the collagen, right? So the structure itself, the way the cervix is arranged, is a perfect way to keep the baby in. Right? So it's really a load-bearing structure. So they have shown by using this collagen arrangement in at various depths how they have mechanical model that showed that how much weight you can actually sustain, and it's well above the weight of a fetus plus the placenta. So it's this can be also used. These concepts are used to understand better the mechanical property of the cervix, and we do it by finger. So,
Fascinating. Do you have a question?
I don't know if I have time for two questions. One. The question is, why did you select to work in green with green light, 120? Do you think that is there any interest for us to combine two, let's say red or
yeah, so we were interested in different things. We knew the effect was fairly superficial, so we didn't think we had to go really deep into the tissue, and it has been shown by the people doing MRI and other people that actually this arrangement, this circular arrangement, let's think about it as plates, it's kind of parallel to itself. So it's, if anything, it's in other words, the cervix does not change in arrangement as you go through the cervix. Right? So, as a first approach, we thought that we could, just a shallow penetration would give us the best results. But I think it's, the cervix is pretty thick, so I think you can go much deeper. And we were kind of worried about crosstalk effects, or how much of the sampling we would do before we would lose that nice orientation. But we have not done that study, but I'd say it's a good one.
BIOAMs, second question, just going a little bit in the same direction. You said that the roughness is important. What do you think about combining coherence with non-coherent imaging, coherent to study the spectral pattern?
Right. Yeah. So actually, I postdoc with a fellow at Johns Hopkins that was a spectral, expert. So that work, really, the autoplane work started on the idea of comparing speckle roughness assessment with, this polarimetric assessment. And Germer was my advisor at that time as well. And so it's, of course, it can be done with speckle. There are level of roughness, I think, where polarization in certain conditions can be used more effectively. But I'm not claiming to be a speckle expert, but we looked at it, and for this study, since we wanted to do other things aside from roughness, we did it with polarimetry.
Cool. Can we take starting to run a little behind session, so do you mind catching her after the call?
No problem.
My apologies. Let's thank the speaker again.